All right, guys, a little change of scenery here as we wrap up the Cold War. We get into the 1980s. That's kind of where we're going to get to a turning point or a finality of this Cold War issue that's going on between the two superpowers and the hot wars and proxy wars and all the issues going on around the world as we move closer to the modern age, modern day. A big part of the end of the Cold War, though, does start at the beginning of the 1980s, especially in this country, when Ronald Reagan becomes the President of the United States. And he's going to bring a different approach. Let me slide my face up here. He's going to bring a different approach to the Cold War, extremely conservative. And that's going to be a big deal here. You know, Jimmy Carter, after coming out of the 1970s, really had an issue with terrorism and trying to stop this movement of making ourselves look like a superpower. Reagan's going to bring that back in. He's the oldest president that's going to be elected in 1980 or 1980, and he's just going to look at containing the Cold War in a much, much different way, kind of at a win-at-all-cost type deal, but one that's going to be beneficial to the United States. All right, so a big part is obviously continuing containment. That's what every president's going to do. We've talked about this from Truman all the way to Reagan. But now we're going to focus a little bit on Latin America. Remember, we have third world countries down here that are not aligned, or ones that we had supported with dictators. However, there is a spread of communists that is moving into South America and Latin America that we're going to try to stop. Places like Honduras and Nicaragua and Panama. Are going to have some communist overtones that we're going to have to work on. As a matter of fact, one small story, if I can get in here, is the communist dictator of Panama, Manuel Noriega. To get him out of his palace, the American military blasted Metallica for like 3 straight days as loud as they could, which is really, really funny if you think about it, but he couldn't handle it, so he finally gave up and gave in. All right, we also have more defense spending, and a great example of our defense spending is a program that we are going to research but actually never put into place, which is the SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, otherwise known as our Star Wars program. Obviously now, at this point, you know, you have nuclear warheads that can travel all around the globe very quickly. The idea of ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that can travel into space. I mean, that's part of the space race, was to move those, and the use of satellites to track these. I mean, this is our defense initiative that, even though we don't actually put into play, will scare the living dog out of people and really scare the Soviets to a degree, because they're not quite up to date with their satellite strategic defense. As a matter of fact, they had an issue in 1983 where they believed that the Americans had actually launched 6 missiles at the Soviet Union, and really all it was the sun reflected off a cloud the wrong way and triggered the satellite. Fortunately, one of the leaders at one of the defense systems in the Soviet Union kind of recognized that this was not a real attack and didn't set off World War III. So here's the SDI real quick, and again, it's called the Star Wars program. I know Star Wars is popular right now again, but early 1980s, Star Wars was huge, all right? But basically, it was a ground and space-based system where lasers would be shot off from the ground and deflected off of satellites, and that would shoot down ICBMs. You can kind of see the model here is what they're looking at, and all the different branches of the military really would be involved. This was such an amazing project that would have, if it happened, it would have cost billions upon billions of dollars. But it never came to the forefront. But the idea that we possibly had this definitely scared the Soviets as we move forward through the 1980s. You know, there's going to be a massive nuclear arms buildup at this point. We've already discussed mutual assured destruction and the idea that we're moving towards a greater World War III, but this is, you know, the 1980s, the propaganda of showing war or the nuclear warheads was great. All right, now, in 1985, a new type of leadership is going to take over the Soviet Union, and it's going to come by way of Mikhail Gorbachev. And he's the person you probably need to underline or highlight. He is not your typical communist. He is part of the Communist Party, had been part of the Communist Party for many, many years. However, he was an extremely progressive thinker and saw that what Brezhnev had done in his kind of re-Stalinization process was putting the Soviet Union way behind, you know, not just from a military standpoint, but literally they could not feed their people. And once you can't feed your people or really help them out in a welfare state, then you're not going to be successful as a country. So what Gorbachev's going to do is he's going to radically change, against really the will of some of the leaders of the Communist Party, to fix the Soviet Union. And really when he does that, it's going to be a tide change. It's going to bring really an end to this Cold War issue. All right, so the first major program that he is going to institute is what was called Glasnost. And folks, I'm going to tell you right now, Glasnost and Perestroika, the two programs we're about to talk about, are huge. So you really got to know what these are. All right, so from a simple definition, the policy or practice of a more open, consultative government and wider dissemination of information. And really what it's doing is it's breaking down the Iron Curtain. It's opening up the Soviet Union for other countries to see from a political standpoint what's going on. And when we talk about wider dissemination of information, what we're looking at here really is freedom of the press. I mean, that has not been seen. You're talking about totalitarian governments, and now we're opening up this curtain. The curtain is breaking down for other countries to see. So early, here we are, this communist stronghold, the superpower, is starting to break down because they kind of have to, and Gorbachev is really, really promoting this as we move forward. The other program of Perestroika, all right, is meant to not just reform the political system like Glasnost is doing, opening up to the Western world, but really looking at it and making it more democratic. Communism is an extension of democracy to a degree when you look at democratic ideals, except in the fact that it's totalitarian, which is a big problem. The other part is Perestroika makes the Soviet Union more economically viable. It needs money, and the system they're going to start to turn to, ironically enough, is the system they've been fighting for so long, and that's a form of capitalism. Now, not free market capitalism like we see, or that laissez-faire capitalism of Adam Smith, but really this economic system where Western ideas are coming in, and allowing people to make some money, go into business to help themselves. And it's really going to shift the tides. I mean, it's going to make a big difference in how the Soviet Union is going to move forward from the mid-1980s until 1991 when Gorbachev is removed from office. Now, he does this willingly, of course, but he will be removed at the end. But Soviet Union is going to be in a good place when he is out. All right, and this does really bring an end to the Cold War. Okay, so the symbolic end of the Cold War is kind of the major symbol of the Cold War, which was the Berlin Wall. I mean, the Berlin Wall was the epitome of the Iron Curtain, throwing up a wall to split East and West Berlin. And you can see in this picture all the people that are pulling the wall down. And in West Berlin, you can see the graffiti, the art. There's what they call Berlin Wall graffiti art that is in museums around the world. And on the other side, you can see the soldiers of East Germany, the communist soldiers, kind of seeing what's going on. It's such an amazing thing that happened when the Berlin Wall comes down. I mean, it was headlines all over the world. Okay. I'm not going to show you this video here. We can show it in class. But it was an amazing aspect when people in East Germany and people in East Berlin actually got freedom for the first time. So the Cold War will officially end in 1991. There's going to be an attempted coup of Gorbachev by communist political leaders, but that will not be successful. One of those leaders that's going to help Gorbachev is going to be a man named Boris Yeltsin. In 1991, when the Soviet Union does break up, and you can see the picture here of the different countries that are now established, especially these ones like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, those countries there, they're all going to go to democratic types of governments. You have the breakup of Yugoslavia down here. You have the reunification of Germany in 1991. I mean, we're moving towards democracy once again and victory of the Western world. But Boris Yeltsin, going back to him, what he'll do is he'll be associated with stopping the coup. But in the long run, Boris Yeltsin will be the first democratically elected president of the Russian Federation. And it's just going to be this area here. You have new countries that are created. Slovakia, Czech Republic are broken up. So we're breaking up these countries once again, just like we had with the end of World War I. All right, so the second video we're going to look at is going to be the 1990s.